it seems that eyewitnesses will be the biggest asset to figuring out exactly what's happening. Katie seems to be, the young lady, Katie McCormack, seems to be a very important witness to be able to say, hey, where did you last see Nolan go towards last? Like, did you see him get on the boat with his friends? Like, how do you feel about her? Any issue with her not being publicly open? We haven't heard from outside her sister's post. Any concerns with that?
Yeah, she remains a person of interest to me personally. She's very key. She's going to be a star witness because how certain is she that he was going to get on a boat with his friends that he came with? Did anyone else hear him say that? What time did he tell her that? Did she see him physically go towards the boat like he was going to get on? Who did she ride back with? Yeah, she's going to be very key.
Yeah.
And I believe there's some allegations that her father may have been out there on a boat.
I've heard that as well.
And did she ride back with her father? Was her father left out there? I would want to know the exact nature of her relationship with Nolan. Had they just met for the very first time? Did they have any prior history? Had they been fooling around secretly, or was this their first time ever coming into contact with each other? And how did their family feel about it?
The Nolan Wells case is still hanging over people because the biggest questions have not gone away. And now former Mississippi judge and attorney Carlos Moore is pushing the conversation in a new direction, saying Katie McCormack's account sounds more believable than people may have assumed, while also suggesting that fear and racial pressure could be helping keep the truth buried. What makes this case so hard to shake is that it never really settled into one clean story. Nolan went to Horn Island with friends on the 4th of July, and from that point on, the public has been left with competing versions of what happened next. One version says he stayed behind with Katie. Another suggests he was expected to return with his group. And because those versions do not line up, every new detail keeps changing the weight of the case. That is why Carlos Moore's comments matter. He is not speaking like someone guessing from the outside. He is looking at the situation as a former judge and attorney. And from that perspective, he sees Katie as one of the most important witnesses in the entire case. He does not frame her as the center of blame. He frames her as someone whose account could either confirm the timeline or expose the holes in it. And that is where the tension begins to build. If Katie really knew something important, then her behavior would matter just as much as her words. Moore pointed out that she didn't immediately lawyer up, and he also noted that her sister was the one speaking publicly, while Katie herself stayed out of the spotlight. In his view, that doesn't look like a person scrambling to cover herself. It looks more like a person whose account has been filtered through family and silence, but not necessarily fabricated. That distinction is important. Moore is not saying Katie's story automatically solves the case. He is saying the way she has handled herself does not fit the image of someone trying to hide a major lie. And in a case like this, where every statement gets pulled apart online, that becomes a serious point. A witness does not need to be loud to be important. Sometimes the quiet witness is the one with the most useful information. The reason this matters so much is that the case keeps coming back to the same core problem. Too many people were supposedly around, and yet the story still feels incomplete. That is what makes the whole thing frustrating. If several people were on the island, if multiple boats were involved, and if the timeline has already shifted once, then the public should have a much clearer picture than this by now. The fact that it is still murky tells you how many questions remain. Moore leaned hard into that point. He kept focusing on whether the details Katie gave can be verified by other people and by records. Did Nolan say he was going to get back on the boat? Did Katie actually see him move in that direction? Or did she only hear about it after the fact? Who else heard what he said? And who did she leave with when the night ended? These are not throwaway questions. They are the exact details that tell investigators whether they are dealing with a solid timeline or a story full of gaps. That is also why the boat keeps coming up. In Moore's view, once everyone got to the island by boat, there should be records somewhere that can help sort the truth from the confusion. A captain would have seen who got on, A passenger list could narrow down who was present. Even the order people left in could matter. In a case built around a boat trip, the boat itself becomes one of the most important witnesses. And if the records match what Katie said, that strengthens her credibility. If they do not, then the contradiction becomes even more serious. Either way, the timeline does not get solved by opinion alone. It gets solved by comparing stories against facts, and that is exactly the kind of pressure Moore is putting on the case. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment telling us the location you are watching from. That helps us see how far this case is reaching and brings more viewers into the conversation around Nolan Wells. The other part of his comments that stands out is the silence. Moore said it would not surprise him if a lot more people saw something than are currently speaking up. That part is important because it changes the mood of the case completely. A quiet witness pool does not always mean nothing happened. Sometimes it means people do not want to be the first one to say what they saw. He went even further by suggesting that racial tension may be part of the reason. Moore referenced the kind of social pressure that can rise when a case becomes racially charged, and he suggested that people may be afraid of being judged, isolated, or targeted if they say the wrong thing. That does not prove any one person is hiding a crime. It explains why silence can spread fast when a community starts feeling exposed. That idea matters because it turns the silence into evidence of a different kind. Not proof by itself, but a clue. If people are withholding what they know because they fear backlash, then the public story is never going to be the full story, until somebody decides the risk of staying quiet is bigger than the risk of speaking. That is one reason this case keeps dragging people back in. It is not just about what happened on Horn Island. It is about who is still afraid to say what they know. And while the public keeps talking, the official investigation continues to move in the background. The FBI has been involved in a limited support role, while the Jackson County Sheriff's Office remains the lead agency. That detail matters because it shows this case has already crossed into a wider investigative lane, even if the public still does not have all the answers it wants. Another major development is that the autopsy has reportedly been completed, but the results have not been released publicly and are now being held for grand jury review. That means there is still no final public cause of death on the table. So when people online start talking like the whole mystery has already been solved, they are moving ahead of the actual facts. The official process is still not finished. Then there is the issue of threats, which has added a darker layer to the story. Reporting says people have now been charged in connection with threats toward a judge, a witness, and local officials tied to the investigation. That tells you how emotionally charged this case has become. It also shows that the pressure around the Nolan Wells story is not just happening in comment sections. It is spilling into real life. That is part of why Moore's comments hit so hard. He is not just talking about one witness or one piece of footage. He is talking about a wider atmosphere where people may be afraid to speak, where families are getting pulled into the conflict, and where public silence may be protecting something bigger than embarrassment. If that atmosphere is real, then the case is not just complicated, it is volatile. And in the middle of all that sits Katie McCormack. She has become one of the most watched names in the entire case, not because she has said everything publicly, but because her account may be one of the few pieces of the night that can still be tested. That is why Moore keeps circling back to her. If the investigation can establish whether her story fits the movement of the boat, the timing of the trip, and the people who were there, then one of the largest unanswered questions starts to narrow. Her sister's comments made the picture even more complicated. According to reporting, Katie assumed Nolan would get back on the boat with his friends, and she left the island with family support after the night was over. That does not close the case, but it does help explain why Moore treats her as a witness whose statement deserves serious attention instead of instant condemnation. That is the difference between speculation and investigation. Speculation says, She must know everything. Investigation says, what exactly did she see and who can confirm it? Moore's approach is closer to the second one. He keeps stressing that if the people on that island are being truthful, then their stories should line up. If they are not lining up, then somebody is leaving something out. That is also what makes the silence around the rest of the group so unsettling. The more people insist that somebody must have seen something, the more the unanswered questions grow. Who saw Nolan last? Who told whom he was going back? Who left first? Who stayed behind? Why did no one speak sooner? And if there really were people there who know more than they are saying, what exactly are they afraid of? Moore's racial prejudice warning gives that silence a more dangerous shape. He is basically saying that in a charged environment, people may choose self-protection over truth. They may worry about being ostracized. They may worry about their families. They may worry that once they speak, they can never take it back. That is the kind of fear that can keep a case frozen, even when there are plenty of eyes on it. It also explains why this update has spread so quickly. The audience already knows the basic story. What they want now is the missing piece that makes the whole thing make sense. And Moore is suggesting that the missing piece may not be a single dramatic confession. It may be a collection of small truths that people have been too scared to say out loud. So when people ask why this case still feels unresolved, that is the answer. The public has pieces, but not the full picture. The boat trip is known. The island is known. Katie's presence is known. The witness conflict is known. The pressure around the story is known. But how those pieces fit together is still not locked in. And until that happens, every update keeps opening the same wound again. That is why Carlos Moore's position is so important. He is saying that Katie may be closer to the truth than people think, that the silence around the rest of the group may be telling us something, and that racial tension could be part of why the story has not fully come out. Whether people agree with him or not, it is a powerful shift in the way this case is being framed. At this stage, the most important thing is not the rumour of the day. It is the trail of details that can still be checked. Who was on the boat? Who got off the boat? Who saw Nolan last? What Katie actually observed? Why the group stayed quiet? And whether fear, race, or something else entirely is the reason the truth has been so hard to extract. The deeper you look at this case, the more you realise that the silence may be louder than the statements. And if Moore is right, then the truth has been sitting inside that silence all along, waiting for the right questions to pull it out. For now, the investigation remains open. The public remains hungry for answers, and the story continues to shift under the weight of every new statement. But one thing is clear. Carlos Moore is not treating Katie McCormack like a throwaway name. He is treating her like a witness whose words may eventually force the real story into the light. That is the tension holding this case together right now. Not just what happened on Horn Island, but who knows more than they are saying, and how long they can keep that truth hidden before the facts finally speak for themselves. This video is based on publicly available reporting and on-the-record commentary at the time of writing. No individual has been charged with a crime in connection with Nolan Wells' death, and all persons discussed are presumed innocent unless proven otherwise in a court of law.